First Ladies of the United States of America. Part 2, Hostesses of the Nation. The unelected, unpaid White House hostesses have the considerable duty of smoothing the way for diplomacy, preserving White House history, and humanizing the president's image. Their personal triumphs and tragedies are played out on a worldwide stage. They influence the nation as fashion icons, social activists, and arbiters of change. In this 6-part series, we'll meet the 53 fascinating women who have served as First Lady and see how the role has evolved over the past 2.5 centuries. Louisa Johnson Adams was born in London and is one of only 2 foreign-born First Ladies. She was the illegitimate daughter of an American merchant. At 22, she met 30-year-old diplomat John Quincy Adams. He was interested in her older sister, but eventually settled on Louisa. When John's father, John Adams, was elected president, the couple moved to the U.S. After London, Louisa found provincial Massachusetts dull, but she loved her in-laws. She suffered migraines and several miscarriages, but eventually gave birth to 4 children. In 1809, John Quincy was appointed ambassador to Russia. The couple left their eldest son at school in Boston and took 2-year-old Charles to St. Petersburg. Louisa enjoyed the glamour of the Tsar's court, but struggled with frigid winters, strange customs, and her own health. She gave birth to a daughter, Louisa, who died at 11 months. Peace negotiations during the War of 1812 called John to London, and Louisa and Charles embarked on a 40-day carriage journey across war-torn Europe. Highwaymen filled her with unspeakable terror, but the family was reunited and Louisa enjoyed the next 2 years in her homeland. John was appointed Secretary of State, and the family moved to Washington. Louisa held social salons every Tuesday evening and gained a reputation as an outstanding hostess, though she would have preferred quiet evenings reading and playing music at home. John was elected president in 1825. Louisa kept silkworms at the White House. John lost re-election, and Louisa was glad to retire from the limelight. But then, John was elected to the first of 17 years in the House of Representatives, and Louisa was once again pushed into the role of hostess. Her 2 eldest sons died young, adding to her grief. John Quincy died in 1848, and Louisa died 4 years later, age 77. They were entombed together near his parents in Quincy, Massachusetts. In 1787, beautiful and cheerful Rachel Donelson, daughter of one of the co-founders of Nashville, Tennessee, married Louis Robards, a Kentucky landowner. But Louis was abusive. Rachel left him, and Louis agreed to file for divorce. A year later, Rachel fell in love with a lanky and ambitious soldier, Andrew Jackson, and they got married. Little did she know that her divorce had never been granted. As Kentucky had just become a state, the paperwork got lost in the government shuffle. The newlyweds were shocked to learn that their union was bigamous. When a political rival attacked Rachel's honor, Andrew killed him in a duel. Jackson purchased the Hermitage, a cotton plantation, and owned over 300 enslaved people. The couple didn't have any biological children, but they adopted 2 of her nephews, and Lincoln, a Creek orphan who was found on the battlefield with his mother's dead body. Andrew became a national hero by forcing the native Creek tribes off their land, claiming Alabama and Georgia for the U.S., and by seizing Florida in the First Seminole War. In 1828, Andrew Jackson ran for president. During the brutal campaign, Rachel's bigamous marriage, which had been settled 24 years earlier, was aired, and her reputation was dragged through the mud. Rachel fell into anxiety and depression. Jackson won the election, but Rachel suffered a heart attack and died at the age of 61. Andrew was devastated. He laid her to rest in the white dress she had selected for his inaugural ball, and then headed to Washington. Emily Donelson was Rachel's niece. She had been educated at the Nashville Female Academy. At 17, she wed her cousin, Andrew Jackson Donelson, who had been adopted by Rachel and Andrew. When Rachel died suddenly before becoming First Lady, Andrew asked Emily to step into the role of White House hostess. She was 21 and her husband was the president's personal secretary. The wife of Jackson's Secretary of War, Peggy Eaton, became the topic of gossip, as her marriage had begun as an adulterous affair. The president was sympathetic, as his own beloved Rachel had been slandered in a similar fashion. He argued with Emily and several of his cabinet members for snubbing Peggy. Emily refused to welcome Peggy to the White House, and in protest, she returned to Tennessee, where she later died of tuberculosis at the age of 29. Jackson needed a new social hostess, so he promoted his other daughter-in-law, Sarah York Jackson, who hailed from a wealthy Philadelphia family. She married Andrew Jackson Jr. and had 5 children. After Jackson's death, Sarah's husband inherited the Hermitage, but he mismanaged it and was forced to sell it to the state of Tennessee. The family tried to set up in Mississippi, but were forced out by hurricanes. They returned to the Hermitage as impoverished tenants. Sarah died in 1887, age 84. Martin Van Buren married his childhood sweetheart, Hannah Hose. They were wed for 12 years and had 5 children. She died of tuberculosis at the age of 35, 18 years before Martin was elected president. The widowered head of state had to do without a first lady for the first 18 months in office, until his son married Angelica Singleton Van Buren. She was born in South Carolina and was educated at Madame Groslourd's French School in Philadelphia. During a visit to Washington, D.C., her mother's cousin, former First Lady Dolly Madison, introduced her to the president's bachelor son, Abraham. Angelica was a great success as White House hostess. Abraham and Angelica embarked on a diplomatic tour of Europe, and upon returning, she attempted to incorporate European flair at the White House. Angelica gave birth to a daughter, Rebecca, at the White House, but the baby died. After Martin lost re-election, Angelica and Abraham spent their summers at the Van Buren home in New York and wintered at her family plantation in South Carolina. Angelica had 4 sons, 3 of whom survived to adulthood. The couple moved to New York City, where Angelica spent the rest of her life. She died in 1877, age 59. Anna Sims Harrison was born in Morristown, New Jersey. She was the last First Lady to be born in a British colony. Her mother died when she was just a year old, and her father disguised himself as a British soldier in order to smuggle his baby daughter to his parents on Long Island, who raised her safely during the Revolutionary War. In 1794, the family moved to the Ohio wilderness, where her father became a prominent landowner. There she met Lieutenant William Henry Harrison, who was stationed at Fort Washington. Anna's father disapproved of her marrying a soldier, so the couple eloped. When confronted by his new father-in-law about how he intended to support his bride, he responded, "By my sword and my own right arm, sir." Anna and William had 10 children. All but 1 survived. William was appointed governor of the Indiana Territory and later won fame in the War of 1812. In 1840, at the age of 68, he ran for president. Anna was unwell and not able to accompany her husband to Washington, so remained behind to pack up their home. William's daughter-in-law, Jane Irwin Harrison, filled in as acting First Lady at the inauguration. Exactly 1 month later, William Henry Harrison succumbed to pneumonia. He was the first U.S. president to die in office. Anna was the only U.S. First Lady never to set foot in the White House. She lived with her son in Indiana and helped to raise his 8 children, including her grandson, future President Benjamin Harrison. Anna died in 1864, age 88. Jane Irwin Harrison died of tuberculosis in 1847, age 43. Letitia Christian Tyler was born at her family's plantation in Virginia. She was shy, quiet, pious, selfless, and devoted to her family. At 18, she met law student John Tyler, who formally courted her for 5 years. He was only allowed to kiss her hand after they became engaged. The couple had a happy marriage and 8 children. Letitia preferred to remain home rather than socialize during her husband's rise in politics. At 49, she suffered a stroke, which left her paralyzed. John Tyler became vice president to William Henry Harrison, and when he died, John unexpectedly became president. Letitia remained in the upstairs living quarters of the White House, coming downstairs only to attend her daughter's wedding. Letitia died in the White House of a stroke in 1842, age 51. For the next 2 years, her daughter-in-law, Priscilla Cooper Tyler, took on the role of First Lady. She came from a New York City theatrical family and worked as an actress from the age of 17. While playing Desdemona in Othello, she met Robert Tyler. They wed and had 8 children. Priscilla's outgoing personality and training as an actress made her a success as First Lady. In 1844, John Tyler remarried, and his new bride took over the role. During the Civil War, Priscilla and Robert moved to Richmond, Virginia, where he became treasurer of the Confederacy. After the defeat, they moved to Alabama, where Priscilla died in 1889, age 73. Julia Gardiner Tyler was born on Gardiner Island, a privately owned island off the coast of Long Island, New York. At 19, she shocked polite society by posing in an advertisement for a department store. Her parents took her on a tour of Europe to get her away from the scandal. At 21, she met the 51-year-old president. John Tyler was immediately attracted to the vivacious socialite, while she had little interest in the reserved old politician. 5 months after his wife died, John proposed to Julia at a White House masquerade ball. She turned him down. He continued to pursue her and proposed multiple times. While Julia, her sister, and father were attending a reception on board a steam frigate, a naval gun exploded, killing her father and several others. Julia was devastated, and President Tyler stepped in to dry her tears. In her distraught state, she agreed to marry him. John Tyler was the first president to wed while in office. Only 12 people attended the nuptials in New York City. They hosted a reception at the White House with a wedding cake in the Blue Room. Julia was the object of enormous public fascination. She savored her role as First Lady and social hostess. She ordered the anthem, "Hail to the Chief," to be played when her husband entered events, and the song remains the president's anthem. When John left office, the couple retired to his Virginia plantation, Sherwood Forest. Julia gave birth to 7 children, making John Tyler the most prolific father in presidential history, with a total of 15 children. The New York socialite grew accustomed to the luxuries of plantation living and wrote an essay in defense of slavery. When the Civil War broke out, John took a position in the Confederate Congress, but died before it convened. During the conflict, Julia lost the plantation and 60 enslaved people she had inherited. She moved to her mother's home on Long Island. A group of Union soldiers almost burned the house to the ground when it was discovered that Julia was flying a Confederate flag. Upon her mother's death, Julia and her brother got into a legal battle over the estate. The Panic of 1873 further depleted her finances. She returned to Virginia to live with her adult children. She lobbied Congress to grant an annual pension of $5,000 to the widows of former presidents. In 1889, while staying at the Exchange Hotel in Richmond, where John Tyler had died 27 years earlier, Julia suffered a stroke and died at 68. Sarah Childress Polk was born in Tennessee to a plantation owner. She met James Polk when she was 12 and he 19. They were both being taught by the same tutor. Sarah attended Moravian's Salem Academy in North Carolina, one of the few higher education schools open to women. James Polk began courting her when she was in her late teens. His mentor, Andrew Jackson, advised him to marry the wealthy, pretty, ambitious, and intelligent Sarah. He did when she was 20 and he 28. The couple never had biological children, likely because a youthful bladder stone surgery left James infertile. But they did foster a few relatives. Sarah played an active role in James's political career, often writing his speeches and working on his campaigns. He relied on her advice and reassurance. It was not considered a woman's place to express political opinions, but Sarah often spoke her own mind with the preface, "Mr. Polk believes." In 1845, James K. Polk was elected president. Sarah loved her role as Queen of Hospitality. She was a devout Presbyterian and banned dancing, card games, and hard liquor from the White House, earning her the nickname Sahara Sarah. Only 3 months after leaving the White House, James died of cholera. Early in her widowhood, Sarah became a recluse, but she recovered from depression and once again hosted distinguished guests at Polk Place in Nashville, Tennessee. She adopted her orphaned grandniece, Sally, and raised her as her own daughter. She wore black throughout her 42-year widowhood, the longest of any U.S. First Lady. She died in 1891, age 87. Margaret Peggy Smith Taylor was born in Maryland to a plantation owner. While visiting her sister in Kentucky, the 21-year-old was introduced to 25-year-old Lieutenant Zachary Taylor, and the pair were married. Peggy was a devout Episcopalian and prayed often for her husband's safety on the battlefield. She promised God to give up the pleasures of society if he returned safely from the Mexican-American War. The hardship of following military camps and giving birth to 6 children took their toll on Peggy's health. When Zachary pursued a political career, Peggy prayed for his defeat, as she dreaded a life in the public eye. Zachary won the presidency in 1849. Peggy suffered from poor health and mobility, and rarely left the second floor of the White House. Hostess duties were left to her daughter, Mary Bliss. After only 16 months in office, Zachary died suddenly of a stomach disease. Peggy died 2 days later and was buried next to him in Louisville, Kentucky. Abigail Powers Fillmore was born in upstate New York, the youngest of 7 children of a Baptist minister. Her father died shortly after her birth, and her mother moved the family further west, into the frontier, in the hopes that her inheritance would go further. She brought her husband's library, which she used to educate her children. Abigail loved literature and became proficient in math, government, history, philosophy, and geography. At 16, she became a teacher. When she was 20, her oldest pupil was 19-year-old Millard Fillmore. Teacher and pupil bonded over their shared love of knowledge, and their relationship became romantic. They continued their courtship as Millard attended law school. They were married when he was 26 and she 27, but they could not afford a honeymoon. Abigail continued to teach until the birth of their 2 children. After years of practicing law, Millard was finally able to buy the family a 6-room home in Buffalo, New York. Abigail learned social graces as the wife of a congressman, but preferred to spend her time reading or gardening. Millard relied on his wife's sage political advice and never made a decision without consulting her. In 1849, he became vice president, and when Zachary Taylor died, the Fillmores moved in to the White House. Abigail was not delighted to play hostess. Every Friday night, the White House held a reception where she had to stand for hours greeting guests. An old ankle injury made this agony for her. She did, however, enjoy creating a literary salon and invited William Thackeray, Charles Dickens, and Washington Irving to read at the White House. Abigail built the White House Library. As First Lady, she rose the profile of educated and working women and made these pursuits more socially acceptable. She advised Millard against signing the Fugitive Slave Act. He did anyway, and in addition to costing countless lives and freedom, it cost him the nomination for a second term. Nevertheless, the Fillmores were excited about their retirement and planned to tour Europe. At the outdoor inauguration for Franklin Pierce, Abigail caught a cold, which turned into bronchitis and then pneumonia. She died at 55, just 26 days after leaving the White House. Jane Appleton Pierce was born in New Hampshire, the daughter of a reverend. She was petite, shy, melancholy, and frail due to tuberculosis. At 28, she met 30-year-old Franklin Pierce, who had just been elected to the House of Representatives. The couple wed and had 3 sons. Franklin Jr. died at just 3 days old, and Frank Robert died at 4 from epidemic typhus. Jane and Franklin had a great affection for one another, but they argued often. She hated politics and blamed it for the deaths of their sons and Franklin's alcoholism. She wanted her husband to give up his seat and return to New Hampshire. Instead, he ran for Senate. Franklin became a brigadier general in the Mexican-American War. Afterward, he was offered positions as U.S. Attorney General, Governor of New Hampshire, and a U.S. Senate seat. But because of Jane's objections, he turned them down and remained at home for 4 years. Finally, in 1852, he received the nomination for president. When Jane heard the news, she fainted. Franklin couldn't resist the highest office and persuaded his wife that if he became president, their only surviving son, Benny, would have a brighter future. She agreed, but the decision caused an irreparable rift in their relationship. Shortly before his inauguration, their 11-year-old son, Benjamin, was killed in a train accident. Jane was devastated and saw the loss as God's punishment for her husband's vanity. She did not attend the inauguration. She fell into a deep depression and had no interest in being First Lady. She spent her days in the upstairs apartments, writing letters to her dead son and trying to contact him through mediums and seances. Varina Davis, wife of War Secretary Jefferson Davis and future First Lady of the Confederacy, acted as White House hostess. After Franklin's term ended, Jane's health deteriorated, and he took her back to New England. She died of tuberculosis in 1863, age 57. In 1818, 28-year-old James Buchanan met Anne Coleman at a ball and began courting her. But his work kept him away for long periods, and rumors circulated that he was only interested in her for her money. Anne broke off the engagement and then died suddenly. James said, "I feel happiness has fled from me forever," and he chose never to marry. His lifelong bachelorhood has led to speculation that he may have been gay or asexual. James did have a special relationship with fellow politician William Rufus King, with whom he shared rooms and attended social events, a common practice at the time. Contemporaries referred to William as James's better half, wife, and Aunt Fancy. William died of tuberculosis 4 years before James was elected president. When the only bachelor president entered the White House, he recruited his niece, Harriet Lane, to act as First Lady. Harriet had been born in Pennsylvania. Harriet was orphaned at the age of 11. She requested that her favorite uncle, James, become her guardian. He enrolled her in boarding school and later introduced her to Washington society. At 24, Harriet, nicknamed Hal, accompanied her uncle to London, where Queen Victoria gave Dear Miss Lane the rank of ambassador's wife. She drew many suitors with her masses of golden hair and violet eyes. The Queen encouraged Hal to accept the proposal of the British Attorney General so she could remain in London, but her uncle advised her not to rush into marriage. She returned home single. In 1854, James won the White House. Hal loved her role as Democratic queen, and she was a popular hostess. She invited artists and musicians to perform at the White House. Women copied her hair and clothing, especially when she lowered the neckline on her inaugural gown. Ships were named in her honor, songs were written about her, and Harriet became a popular name for baby girls. Hal used her position to promote social causes, especially improving the living conditions of Native Americans on reservations. She launched a new role for First Ladies to be social activists. Harriet struggled with seating charts for the White House's weekly formal dinner parties. In the building tension preceding the Civil War, it was impossible to seat foes apart. By the end of Buchanan's administration, 7 states had seceded from the Union. James and Harriet retired to his country home in Pennsylvania. At 36, she accepted a proposal from a Baltimore banker, Henry Johnston. The pair had 2 sons, but Harriet lost her uncle, husband, and both children by 1885. She lived another 18 years and left her considerable fortune to found a boys' school and a children's hospital at Johns Hopkins University in honor of her sons. She left her art collection to the Smithsonian. In the next video, we'll meet the First Ladies of the Civil War and the second half of the 1800s. The first college-educated First Lady, the first to be married at the White House, 2 who renovated the White House, and 2 who endured the assassinations of their husbands. Don't want to wait for the next episode? Patrons get exclusive early access to all my multi-part series. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a patron and help me make more fascinating history videos. To join, check out the link in the description. Thank you for watching. Want even more tea on history? Check out the History Tea Time podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.